I'm Chef Jonathan Beatty, and welcome to Spartan Chef. And if you want knife skills like this, then stay tuned, and together we are going to conquer cooking and conquer knife skills. All right, guys, now that was a wonderful display of chef bravado, but there was a point to it, okay? Through these guides and through practice, you can get those kind of skills that allow you to dice an onion with your eyes closed. Now, is that particularly useful all the time? No, but what it shows is that I'm confident in my ability to use a knife. And to do that, we're going to focus on three main sections. Okay, we're going to focus on before you cut, while you cut, and after you cut. Okay, these three sections each are extremely important, but if you follow this guide and if you follow these steps, I promise you will be able to conquer knife skills like a true Spartan chef. Before you cut. In this section, we'll look at your cutting board, your knife and you, and your grip on the knife. All right, chefs, now we're gonna set up our cutting board. We have our non-slip shelving material here, or you can use just a wet towel. Go ahead and put our booze block wooden cutting board on here. So you either wanna use a wooden cutting board or a food grade plastic cutting board. Those are gonna be the best for your knives. They're gonna keep them the sharpest. Do not use any marble or glass cutting boards. They will dull your knife, and a dull knife is a dull chef. All right, so right now, chefs, we're gonna learn how to choose our own knives. All right, so when you choose your knife, I wanna say this first, don't buy the most expensive knife right away when you're trying to learn how to use a knife. If you've been using a knife for years, that's fine, but you don't buy a Ferrari for your first car. Okay, so today we're gonna have a Hinkle's German style knife that we're gonna work with. This is a great knife, this is a great learning knife, and I highly recommend it for everybody. Now it's time to learn how to grip our knife. So the first thing we're gonna do is take our finger and our thumb, we're gonna grip the heel of the blade right here. We're gonna wrap our fingers around the handle to give us this firm but secure grip on the knife. Now remember, you want a firm, relaxed grip, but you wanna make sure that you're not gripping it like your life depends on it, because the harder you hold anything, the less control you have over it. While you cut. In this section, we'll be learning the claw or the shield wall technique, different types of cuts to use, and how to properly use your blade. So here is the most important part of conquering knife skills, the shield wall, or as most people on YouTube and everywhere else call it, the claw. I call it the shield wall because, of course, I love everything Spartan and war. So the shield wall is what's used in ancient Sparta and Greece to protect everyone around you. Okay, it's every man protecting himself. It's the phalanx, if you want to call it that too. But what this does is all of these fingers are protecting my thumb, and they're protecting one another. Okay, and that's the most important thing to remember, is that everybody has to be working together in this situation for it to work properly. Your thumb has to be back here, your fingers have to maintain a very straight angle here, and you have to make sure that the tips of your fingers are tucked underneath, okay? So this is an extremely important part of conquering knife skills. This is the first and foremost thing that you have to learn to make sure that you are ready to conquer. So now time to put the shield wall into action. So, as you can see, my knife is pressed directly against my fingers. My thumb, back here, is holding the vegetable right here, and my fingers as well are gripping the vegetable. So it helps if you have a little bit of fingernails for this too. But what we're going to do now is we're going to slice using the blade of our knife. Slice using the blade of our knife. But as you can see, because I have my fingers protected, there's really no way I can cut myself. So to kind of demonstrate this across the entirety of the cutting board, if I have my hand out here like this, I have my knife pressed flat up against it. The idea is that you are moving your hand across the cutting board, gripping whatever you're cutting while your knife moves with it. Okay, I'm never going to cut myself because I know exactly where my knife is the whole time. I know where my fingers are. I know where the trouble spots are, and I make sure that my thumb doesn't pop out. Because if it does, you can have something very painful happen to you. Don't let that happen. But if you follow these simple rules for the shield wall, it will keep all of your fingers safe and will allow you to conquer knife skills. The types of cuts that we're going to do today with our knife are the fundamental cuts that you need to know to conquer knife skills. The first of those is the Julienne. So Julienne is something, it's basically a matchstick cut. And the matchstick cut can be cut into a range of different sizes. Today I'm going to be showing you a finer matchstick cut, but you can cut them in any size, and then you can turn any matchstick or Julienne cut into a dice, which is the way that I learned it as a professional chef. The second method is dice. So as I just discussed, dicing is probably the most fundamental part of using a knife. Every recipe calls for something to be diced. Dicing comes in all different shapes and sizes, and it's completely based on what you need to use it for. Don't feel like your dice is wrong. If you feel like that dice is good for you and that size is good for you, then it is. The next one's going to be the rock chop, or the chopping method. I call it the rock chop because of the way that I'll show you how I actually pivot and hold the knife. But this can be useful, especially for people who can't get a very fine dice right away. You can use this method to go back and actually make your dice smaller and smaller until you get that size that you're looking for without trying to do these perfect cuts ahead of time. So it's a very useful thing to know how to do for a beginning chef or for anyone who just loves cooking at home. The last thing is the chiffonade. So chiffonade is mainly reserved for herbs, and it's just a very fine way of cutting a ribbon cut off of herbs. So that's what gives you those wonderful long pieces of basil or parsley or cilantro and things like that. So that's a chiffonade cut. Not eternally useful and can be turned into other things, but it's very, very fundamental to cooking. So those are the different types of cuts that we're going to look at today, and I promise you by the end of this, you're going to feel like you can conquer these. The Julienne. So the Julienne is essentially a matchstick cut. So today I have a carrot here as a demonstration piece. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to actually cut the carrot in half because you want to make it more manageable. That's going to allow you to actually be able to work with it without trying to cut through an entire carrot with your knife, which is kind of dangerous. The other thing is, as you can see, this carrot is round. Round. So to make it a lot easier to cut, you're going to do something called squaring off the vegetable, where you take a very small amount of the carrot off, save it for stock, and you're going to make a little square out of it. And it's going to greatly help in the actual dicing because it's going to give you a much better shape to work with. Okay, it's going to give you a nice, somewhat square shape. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take our knife, and using the full blade of the knife, we are going to slice through the carrot. We are going to slice through the carrot using the blade of the knife. Very important. Okay, so then we have these rectangular pieces like this. So now what we're going to do to make a Julienne is we're just going to slowly go through and cut them into matchsticks. The idea being that they should be roughly the same size all the way around as little squares. Wonderful. All right. And then I'll just take these and snip it a little bit there. Perfect. Go ahead and tuck these guys over here. All right. And that's a beautiful Julienne. The dice. So, now that we have achieved our Julienne cut, we are going to use this Julienne cut to make a fine dice, which is the way that the French teach us. So to make a dice, it's very simple. All you're going to do is take your Julienne cut, and in the beginning it's best not to try to cut too many things at once when you're starting to practice with it, but you want to line them up so you have your beautiful Julienne. You're going to go ahead and put your shield wall grip onto these things, these carrots, and then we're going to dice. Using the blade of the knife, rocking the knife, and as you can see, we get this beautiful fine dice right here on this carrot. That's really wonderful. Now, because this is a dice segment, I really wanted to show you guys an onion as well, because of course you saw me do that earlier. Here I have a red onion. So for the red onion, the simplest way to dice an onion, and this can be done for red, white, however you wish, is I cut off the top and bottoms of the onion, take off the skin, and as you can see, this is going to be our root end right here, and that's what's going to have the most structure, okay, which is very important when it comes to actually dicing an onion. Yeah, the skin can be a little annoying, that's okay. Nothing to stop a Spartan chef. All right. So, now we have our onion. We have our root end. So what we're gonna do is put our root end facing away from us. You're gonna see, I'm gonna take the knife and I'm gonna cut, make small cuts across the knife, or across the onion, but I'm not gonna cut all the way to the root. So, just to show you guys, you can see that the onion is now separated into lots of little pieces right there. So now I'm going to turn it so that the root is facing to my left, and I'm right-handed, so you would reverse this if you're left-handed, and then I'm going to dice. As thick or as thin as you want. The thicker, the bigger the dice, the thinner, the smaller the dice. All right, beautiful. And then the very last thing I'm going to show you is you can julienne an onion as well. The julienne an onion, you don't make any cuts. You keep the root end to your left, and then you're going to make slices out of this onion. And if you're caramelizing onions or you're doing anything like that, you can obviously do this, and it's very nice. But what you can also do is you can take this onion and you can dice it as well. Because of the structure of the onion, this works as well for making an onion dice. So that's dicing, and that's onions. So now that we have accomplished and conquered the dice, and we have conquered the julienne, we are now going to conquer the chop, or the rock chop as I call it. So the first thing I want to show you as a little bonus is how to clean garlic, fresh garlic. So you're going to put your garlic down in the middle of your cutting board. You're going to take your knife, you're going to put the heaviest part of your knife on top of the garlic, and then very carefully smash. You're going to smash down pretty hard onto this, because when you do, you're going to see that it comes out very easily. Now you have some beautiful fresh garlic. I swear to God, if I learn that anybody is buying chopped garlic in water, I am going to lose it. So now that we have our garlic here, we can go ahead and we can do kind of the same motion that we would do on our julienne, making sure we keep our shield wall up to protect our thumb. All right, so this is chopping technically. Now the rock chop is a method that you see everybody use, and I kind of put a term to it, I think. So the idea is you're going to take your knife, you're going to put the tip of your knife down on the cutting board, and you're going to use your hand to actually pivot that knife in place. So the knife is going to go in this motion here as we chop. So we are going to rock the knife and we are going to chop, hence the rock chop. Like that. So you try to keep the knife as anchored as possible, kind of gather it back up here, And then same thing, keeping your hand on the knife, keeping your thumb away from the blade. Just rock back and forth. If you do this, you will continue to chop things finer. Chopping like this is used to make bigger things finer. So if you cut something into a dice and you're unhappy with the size, say with these red onions, you say, God, I just want these red onions to be a little bit finer for this guacamole. You would bring these over here, hold your blade, and chop through. Go through once, go through twice, get everything off your knife, gather it back up, kind of evenly disperse it, and then same thing. Don't go fast at first, you will get faster. Don't you worry. Just like that. And then you have a nice, finely diced onion, just like that, ready to make some guacamole. We have conquered the Julienne, we have conquered the dice, we have conquered the rock chop. Now it's time to conquer the chiffonade. So chiffonade is it's a French term, obviously, that is reserved mainly for cutting different herbs. And in this case, I have some basil here. So basil is one of the most chiffonaded herbs. And you have to be careful when you chiffonade basil because basil can blacken if your knife isn't sharp. So as I said earlier, dull knife, dull chef, black basil. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab 4 or 5 of these leaves of basil here. Put this guy right over here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna stack these basil leaves up together, all right? Biggest basil leaf on the bottom, because it kind of helps to hold all the other basil leaves. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna roll this up. Lots of people out there are good at rolling things up, so I'm sure you'll have no problem with this. So, now that we have our basil rolled up into this tight little package, we're going to trim off the base, and then we are going to make little ribbon cuts out of it. So the same thing. You'll see we're using the same techniques. We're using the blade of our knife. We're using all 8 inches of our knife, and we are making this really wonderful ribbon cut basil. Beautiful, usable in bruschetta toppings and marinara sauce, which we will be making very soon. You can use it in anything. And this same process can be used for any herb. You just take the herbs, you kind of roll them all up together. You don't have to stack up parsley into individual pieces and do that, that's fine. But you can chiffonade any herb like this. And basil is especially one of those herbs that is very nice chiffonade and has a very nice presentation point. After you cut, in this section we'll be looking at proper knife cleaning, proper knife storage, and proper knife sharpening. So we learned what to do before we cut, we learned what to do while we cut, so now it is critically important to learn what to do after we use a knife. Okay, so a knife is something that must be treated very gingerly even after use. So cleaning is the first and foremost thing that you want to do with your knife. You want to make sure your knife is nice and clean. Do not put your knife through a dishwasher. It is not good for your knife. I don't care what the instructions say, it is never good to put a knife through a dishwasher. Hand wash your knives very carefully and make sure that they're stored properly. So when it comes to storing knives, you have a couple different options here. Do not just take your knife and throw it into a drawer. You will dull your knife dramatically that way, and it will just be internally frustrating, and the duller the knife, the more likely you are to cut yourself. So do not do that. You can do one of 2 things, or 3 things actually. So here I have my knife roll. So this is my knife roll. It has all of my knives in here. You can take your knife, you can store it in a knife roll, and it protects the knives because the knives will actually roll on top of themselves, and it has this wonderful leather burlap on top to protect the knives. So this is a wonderful way to do it for a chef. In a home kitchen, more than likely, you are going to be using something like this, which is a butcher's block. So a knife block like this is very useful. It keeps the knives all separated, keeps them from dulling their blade, and very useful. I recommend this if you aren't going to use a knife roll and you have multiple knives, I would definitely recommend using a knife block like this. The other option there are all kinds of different sleeves, plastic sleeves, all kinds of different sleeves for your knives. You just want to make sure that you don't use a metal sleeve, because then your knife will be hitting on metal and it will dull. So the last part of proper after you cut knife maintenance is sharpening. So you do not need to sharpen your knives every day. This is a honing steel. Some people call it a sharpening steel. This is in fact a honing steel because it hones the knife, it doesn't sharpen the knife. The thing to remember about knives, and especially I'm referring to Western style knives right now, is they're like a mohawk. They're like my hair up here. They're like a mohawk, okay? And as a knife dulls, it goes down like this. That's fine, and when it dulls like that, it requires sharpening to actually bring a blade back. Now, after daily use, like we're doing today, all that's happened to this mohawk is that it's just ticked over slightly. It's just kind of ticked over, so we're just trying to right the blade back into a mohawk. And that's what a honing steel is used for. So every time you use a knife, you should use a honing steel. There are two ways that I recommend using a honing steel. The first is you take your honing steel, you put it point side down into a towel or something to keep it very sturdy. All right, you're gonna grip it, make sure that your hand is above the little guard here. You're gonna take your knife, and at about a 20-degree angle, you're going to basically pretend that you are slicing a small slice off of this honing steel. Don't go fast at first, go slow. This is very important. The last thing you need to know about honing is that you want to sharpen the same amount of sides each time. So if you're doing 10 swipes on each side, you want to make sure you do 10 swipes on each side. You don't do 9 and 8, or else you're actually going to end up dulling the blade for yourself. The other method that I recommend is like this. You hold your steel kind of straight up like this, and you pull your knife away from you. Same thing. Now, I personally, for all new beginners, recommend this system right here. This is the safest that you're gonna get. This is the best that you're gonna get. I do not recommend that you do this method where you slice towards your hand. That is not very smart. Let's not do that. So if you follow these simple instructions, if you follow this simple guide, you too will conquer knife skills. All right, chefs, if you enjoyed this video, then please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're gonna have so much more stuff coming at you, but we can't learn how to do anything else until we conquer these knife skills. So I want you to take this time, I want you to practice, because that's the only way that we're gonna get better, and I want you to be ready for the next challenge that's gonna be coming as we conquer cooking. Stay sharp.